What if every money-saving tip you've ever followed actually made you poorer in the long run, and the real secret to saving money is doing the exact opposite of what every financial guru tells you? I watched my neighbor Elena save $43,000 in 18 months using a money-saving rule so simple it sounds stupid. Yet 90% of people who hear it will never try it because it violates everything we've been taught about financial discipline. Elena didn't use coupons. She didn't compare prices. She didn't track every expense in a budgeting app. She didn't follow the 50-30-20 rule or any other percentage-based formula. In fact, she deliberately ignored most conventional money-saving advice, and that's precisely why she succeeded where others failed. You see, most money-saving rules don't actually save money. They save pennies while costing dollars. They optimize for the feeling of being frugal rather than the reality of building wealth. They create what behavioral economists call moral licensing, the psychological phenomenon where following small rules gives us permission to break big ones. Today, we're going to expose the money-saving rules that actually work in real life, not just in theory. These aren't the tips you'll find in mainstream financial advice because they require something most people aren't willing to give up: the illusion of control through complexity. But if you're ready to embrace the minimalist approach to saving, where less effort creates more results, then what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you think about money forever. Before we dive into what works, we need to understand why most money-saving advice fails so spectacularly. The answer lies in what I call the granularity trap, the mistaken belief that financial success comes from optimizing small, frequent decisions rather than making a few big decisions correctly. Let me tell you about Kevin, a marketing analyst who was obsessed with money-saving rules. He used 17 different apps to find the best deals, spent Sunday mornings clipping digital coupons, drove across town to save $3 on groceries, and researched every purchase for hours before buying. Kevin could tell you the cheapest gas station within a 10-mile radius, the optimal day to book flights, and exactly which store had the best price on any item you could imagine. Kevin was also broke. Despite all his money-saving efforts, Kevin never seemed to get ahead financially. He was saving money on individual purchases but somehow spending more overall each month. His savings account remained stubbornly empty, and his stress levels around money kept climbing. The harder he tried to save money through conventional rules, the more financially frustrated he became. The breakthrough came when Kevin discovered something that most financial advice completely ignores: the psychological cost of saving money often exceeds the financial benefit. Every minute spent comparing prices, every mental cycle devoted to hunting deals, every decision postponed while researching options was cognitive energy that could have been invested in activities that actually build wealth. But here's the deeper issue that reveals why minimalism is such a powerful approach to saving money. Most people are trying to solve an income problem with expense tactics. Kevin was earning $58,000 per year and spending enormous mental energy trying to save $50 per month through deal hunting and price comparison. Meanwhile, he completely ignored opportunities to increase his income through skill development, networking, or side projects that could have added thousands of dollars to his annual earnings. This is what I call the optimization paradox. The more time and energy you spend optimizing small expenses, the less time and energy you have available for optimizing your income. It's like being so focused on fixing a leaky faucet that you ignore the fact that your roof is missing. The activities feel productive because they create immediate, measurable results, but they're ultimately counterproductive because they divert attention from higher leverage opportunities. The minimalist approach to saving money starts with a fundamental question that most people never ask. What is the true cost of this money-saving activity when you include the time, mental energy, and opportunity cost involved? When Kevin started calculating the full cost of his deal hunting behavior, including the value of his time and the mental fatigue it created, he realized that many of his money-saving activities were actually costing him money. Think about it this way. If you spend 2 hours researching to save $20 on a purchase, and your time has any economic value whatsoever, you're operating at a loss. But most people never make this calculation because the time cost is invisible while the money savings feel concrete and immediate. Now let me share Alina's deceptively simple approach that saved her $43,000 in 18 months. She calls it strategic ignorance, the deliberate decision to ignore most money-saving opportunities so you can focus entirely on the few that actually matter. Alina identified 3 categories of expenses in her life: infrastructure costs, lifestyle costs, and impulse costs. Infrastructure costs were the big, recurring expenses that formed the foundation of her financial life: rent, insurance, utilities, transportation. Lifestyle costs were the recurring expenses that supported her chosen way of living: food, entertainment, hobbies, clothing. Impulse costs were everything else: the random purchases, the convenience spending, the small indulgences. Here's where Alina's approach became revolutionary. She decided to optimize only infrastructure costs, automate lifestyle costs, and completely ignore impulse costs. This decision violated every piece of conventional financial advice she'd ever received, but it worked because it was based on mathematical reality rather than psychological satisfaction. Alina discovered that infrastructure costs represented 65% of her total spending but received only 10% of most people's optimization attention. Meanwhile, impulse costs represented 15% of spending but consumed 90% of most people's money-saving mental energy. By flipping these priorities, she created massive financial leverage with minimal mental overhead. For infrastructure costs, Alina became ruthless in her optimization efforts. She negotiated her rent by offering to sign a longer lease. She shopped for insurance annually and bundled policies for discounts. She moved to a location that reduced her transportation costs by $400 per month. She evaluated her phone, internet, and subscription services once per year and eliminated anything that didn't provide clear value. But here's the key insight. Alina spent significant time and energy optimizing these infrastructure costs because they were high-impact decisions that she only had to make occasionally. Spending 5 hours negotiating rent saves hundreds of dollars per month for an entire year. Spending 5 hours per month hunting grocery deals saves maybe $50 per month and has to be repeated constantly. For lifestyle costs, Alina created what she calls lifestyle budgets, predetermined amounts for categories like food, entertainment, and clothing that she automated wherever possible. Instead of scrutinizing every restaurant meal or clothing purchase, she set reasonable monthly amounts for these categories and spent freely within those limits. This eliminated the mental overhead of constant decision-making while maintaining financial discipline. But the most radical part of Alina's approach was her treatment of impulse costs. She completely stopped trying to optimize small, spontaneous purchases. If she wanted a coffee, she bought it. If she saw a book that interested her, she got it. If she needed something for her apartment, she purchased it without researching alternatives. This sounds financially reckless, but Alina understood something profound about human psychology. The mental energy saved by not optimizing small purchases was redirected toward activities that increased her income and optimized her infrastructure costs. The result was counterintuitive but mathematically inevitable. She spent more on impulse purchases but saved dramatically more overall because her focus was aligned with high-impact activities. Within 6 months of implementing this framework, Elena had negotiated a salary increase, moved to a cheaper apartment that she actually preferred, consolidated her insurance policies for significant savings, and started a side project that generated additional income. The mental clarity created by strategic ignorance allowed her to see and act on opportunities that had been invisible when her attention was scattered across dozens of micro-optimizations. The reason Elena's approach worked where traditional money-saving rules failed comes down to what psychologists call cognitive sustainability, the ability to maintain behavioral changes over time without depleting your mental resources. Let me introduce you to Amanda, a teacher who discovered this principle through painful trial and error. Amanda had tried every money-saving strategy imaginable: envelope budgeting, zero-based budgeting, the cash-only method, extreme couponing, meal planning with price comparisons, and detailed expense tracking. Each method worked for a few weeks or months before Amanda would burn out and abandon the system entirely. The pattern was always the same: initial enthusiasm, impressive short-term results, gradual mental fatigue, and eventual abandonment. Amanda would save money for 3 months, then overspend for 2 months, ending up worse off than when she started. She was stuck in what I call the discipline cycle: periods of extreme financial restriction followed by periods of reactive overspending. The breakthrough came when Amanda realized that sustainable saving isn't about maximizing your savings rate in the short term. It's about finding the optimal balance between savings and cognitive ease that you can maintain indefinitely. Most money-saving advice optimizes for maximum immediate impact without considering psychological sustainability, which is why most people can't stick with conventional financial advice for more than a few months. Amanda developed what she calls the sustainability test. Before implementing any money-saving rule, she would ask herself, "Can I see myself following this rule 5 years from now without feeling deprived or exhausted?" This simple question eliminated 90% of conventional money-saving advice because it was designed for short-term discipline rather than long-term sustainability. The rules that passed Amanda's sustainability test shared 3 characteristics. They were simple enough to become automatic habits, they aligned with her natural preferences rather than fighting them, and they created positive feedback loops that made her feel abundant rather than restricted. For example, instead of meticulously tracking every expense, Amanda automated her savings first and tracked only her remaining spending money. This flipped the psychology from scarcity monitoring to abundance management. Instead of meal planning with price comparisons, she developed 5 simple, healthy meals that she could prepare without thinking and rotated through them regularly. Instead of researching every purchase, she set spending thresholds, amounts below which she would buy immediately without research, and amounts above which she would wait 24 hours before deciding. But here's the most important insight. Amanda discovered that the psychological state you create through your money-saving approach is more important than the specific amount you save. When money-saving rules make you feel restricted, anxious, or deprived, they create psychological pressure that eventually leads to reactive overspending. But when money-saving approaches make you feel abundant, in control, and aligned with your values, they create positive momentum that compounds over time. This is why the minimalist approach to saving money is so powerful. It's designed for psychological sustainability rather than short-term optimization. The goal isn't to save the maximum amount of money this month. The goal is to create simple systems that save substantial amounts of money consistently over years without creating mental stress or feelings of deprivation. Think about the difference between dieting and adopting a healthy lifestyle. Extreme diets produce dramatic short-term results but are psychologically unsustainable, leading to yo-yo patterns that often leave people worse off than when they started. Healthy lifestyle changes produce modest short-term results but compound over time because they're sustainable and enjoyable. The same principle applies to money-saving rules. Extreme frugality produces dramatic short-term savings but creates psychological pressure that leads to eventual reactive overspending. Sustainable money-saving approaches produce consistent long-term wealth building because they work with human psychology rather than against it. Based on studying dozens of people who successfully save substantial amounts of money without feeling deprived, I've identified 3 money-saving rules that consistently work in real life. These rules might seem counterintuitive because they prioritize sustainability over optimization, but that's exactly why they succeed where conventional advice fails. Rule number 1. Automate abundance, not scarcity. Most budgeting advice focuses on restricting spending, but the most successful savers focus on automating wealth building first, then spending freely within their remaining means. Take Michael, a project manager who struggled with traditional budgeting for years. The breakthrough came when he flipped his approach entirely. Instead of trying to control his spending to create savings, he automated his savings to create a natural spending limit. Every payday, predetermined amounts were automatically transferred to his emergency fund, retirement accounts, and investment accounts before he even saw the money. What remained in his checking account was truly discretionary income that he could spend without guilt or calculation. This approach worked because it aligned with human psychology rather than fighting it. Michael never felt restricted because he was spending freely within his available means. He never had to exercise willpower to save money because the saving happened automatically. And he never experienced the psychological pressure that comes from constantly monitoring and restricting expenses. Rule number 2. Optimize systems, not purchases. Instead of optimizing individual buying decisions, successful savers optimize the systems that generate buying decisions. They focus on changing their environment and habits rather than relying on discipline and willpower. Consider Lisa, a consultant who saved over $30,000 by changing her systems rather than her spending behavior. Lisa realized that most of her discretionary spending happened during specific situations: when she was hungry and away from home, when she was bored on weekends, and when she was stressed after difficult workdays. Instead of trying to exercise more willpower in these situations, Lisa changed the systems that created them. She started keeping healthy snacks in her car and office to eliminate hunger-driven food purchases. She planned one enjoyable, low-cost activity each weekend to eliminate boredom-driven shopping. She developed a post-work routine that involved physical activity rather than retail therapy to eliminate stress-driven purchases. The result was effortless saving because Lisa had eliminated the environmental triggers that created unnecessary spending, rather than relying on her willpower to resist them every time they occurred. Rule number 3. Focus on the big rocks, ignore the pebbles. The most successful savers identify the few expenses that have the biggest impact on their financial lives and optimize those ruthlessly while ignoring smaller expenses entirely. James, a graphic designer, discovered that just 3 categories represented 70% of his total spending: housing, transportation, and food. Instead of trying to optimize all his expenses, James focused exclusively on these 3 categories. He moved to a smaller apartment closer to work, which reduced both his rent and transportation costs. He developed simple, healthy eating habits that reduced his food expenses while improving his health. But here's the crucial part. James completely stopped trying to optimize his other expenses. He didn't hunt for deals on clothing, entertainment, or household items. He didn't compare prices on small purchases. He didn't use coupons or cashback apps. This strategic ignorance of small expenses freed up mental energy that he redirected toward freelance work, which increased his income by more than his optimization efforts could have ever saved. The mathematical logic is undeniable. Focusing on expenses that represent 70% of your spending will always produce better results than optimizing expenses that represent 30% of your spending, especially when you consider the time and energy costs of optimization efforts. These three rules work because they're designed around human psychology and mathematical reality rather than theoretical optimization. They create sustainable systems that build wealth over time without requiring constant discipline or creating feelings of deprivation. The most profound insight about money-saving rules that actually work is that their power comes not from the immediate savings they generate, but from the psychological and behavioral changes they create over time. When you adopt sustainable saving approaches, you don't just save money. You develop what I call wealth consciousness, a fundamental shift in how you think about and relate to money. Elena, who we met at the beginning, didn't just save $43,000 through strategic ignorance. She developed mental clarity around money that allowed her to see opportunities that were invisible when her attention was scattered across dozens of micro-optimizations. The confidence she gained from successfully managing her finances with simple systems gave her the courage to negotiate a promotion, start a side business, and make investment decisions that multiplied her wealth far beyond what any amount of coupon clipping could have achieved. This is the compound effect that most people miss when they focus on tactical money-saving tips rather than systematic approaches. Every time you successfully implement a sustainable saving system, you build confidence in your ability to manage money effectively. Every time you automate a financial decision that used to require mental energy, you free up cognitive resources for wealth-building activities. Every time you align your saving approach with your natural psychology rather than fighting it, you strengthen your financial self-efficacy. But the compound effect works in reverse as well. Every time you try and fail to follow unsustainable money-saving rules, you erode your confidence in your ability to manage money. Every time you abandon a budgeting system because it's too complex or restrictive, you reinforce the belief that you lack the discipline to build wealth. Every time you yo-yo between extreme frugality and reactive overspending, you train your brain to associate money management with stress and failure. This is why choosing the right money-saving approach is so crucial. It's not just about the money you save or don't save in the short term. It's about the financial identity and behavioral patterns you're creating over time. The people who build substantial wealth aren't necessarily more disciplined or more knowledgeable about money than everyone else. They're more strategic about choosing approaches that work with their psychology rather than against it. Let me share one final story that illustrates this principle perfectly. David, an engineer, spent 3 years trying to follow complex budgeting systems that never worked for more than a few months. He would create detailed spreadsheets, track every expense, set ambitious savings goals, and inevitably abandon the whole system when life got busy or stressful. Each failure reinforced his belief that he was bad with money and needed even more sophisticated systems to control his spending. The transformation came when David embraced radical simplicity. He automated his savings, created simple spending rules he could follow without thinking, and completely stopped trying to track or optimize small expenses. Within a year, he had saved more money than in the previous 3 years combined, but more importantly, He had developed a sustainable relationship with money that felt effortless rather than stressful. David realized that he hadn't been bad with money. He had been using money management approaches that were incompatible with his personality and lifestyle. Once he aligned his saving strategy with his natural preferences and cognitive limitations, success became inevitable rather than elusive. This is the essence of minimalist money saving. It's not about finding more sophisticated rules or exercising more discipline. It's about finding simpler approaches that you can sustain indefinitely without stress or deprivation. The goal isn't to maximize your savings rate this month. The goal is to create systems that build wealth consistently over decades while allowing you to live abundantly within your means. The money-saving rules that actually work in real life are the ones that make saving money feel natural rather than forced, abundant rather than restrictive, and automatic rather than effortful. They're the rules that align with human psychology, acknowledge cognitive limitations, and prioritize sustainability over optimization. When you master these principles, saving money stops being something you have to do and starts being something that happens naturally as a byproduct of well-designed systems. You stop fighting against your natural tendencies and start leveraging them for financial success. You stop trying to control every financial detail and start focusing on the few details that actually matter. This is the path to real financial freedom, not through perfect control of every expense, but through strategic focus on the expenses that matter most, automated systems that work without your constant attention, and sustainable approaches that build wealth over time without creating stress or deprivation. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels on money-saving tactics that don't work and start implementing approaches that create real, lasting financial change, then subscribe for more insights that will transform your relationship with money from the inside out. Because the secret to saving money isn't learning more rules, it's following fewer rules more consistently. And that journey toward financial simplicity starts with your very next decision.